Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Align Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Torrie Thompson, and this week we are going to dive into something, I don't want to say controversial, but there's a lot of information out there on this topic, good, bad, a lot of misinformation. And so it's something that I see all the time in our practice, as well as things all over the internet. So this week we are breaking down histamines, histamine myths, what histamine is, what to do if you have histamine issues, what it could mean, and how to manage it. So like I mentioned, this is something that we see all the time, whether it's someone coming to us saying, I think I have histamine issues, or, can we test for histamine levels? Or I have hives, what can I do? Or people that as they go through the detox process will experience some form of histamine reactions or histamine issues along the way. So it's something that we see very, very commonly. But unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information out there. You see people that just say, if you have high histamines, just go on a low histamine diet or go take Benadryl or an antihistamine and you'll be fine. And you don't really see a lot of long-term solutions in terms of what to do if you're having a histamine issue. But what people really don't understand is that histamine is far more than itchiness, hives, redness. It is going to play an integral role in our nervous system, our emotions, our mood, our sleep, our energy. So having a good balance of histamine is essential to feeling good, to really being in an optimal state. So what we commonly see is people have no issues with histamine, and then they start detoxing, and all of a sudden maybe they're getting itchy or hives or anxiety or can't sleep. And so that can mean other things, but it often can come back down to a histamine reaction that detox is really exacerbating. And so we're going to break down really what to do, what to look out for, and what could be causing it. So really, what is histamine? Is histamine something bad? Is it good? Is it something we normally have? So histamine is a naturally occurring biogenic amine. So it is not a toxin. It is part of our normal biochemistry. And so we have to have it, but we have to have it in moderate amounts. Where we run into problems is when we have excess amount of histamine released, or when the body can't break down the histamine that's there. And so you get a built up effect of histamine. And so histamine acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. It really controls our wakefulness, our appetite, even some people's motivation. It triggers stomach acid production. So this is going to help people digest food as well as not digest food if you're histamine imbalance. It helps the immune system react to invaders. This is where people associate with food allergies or, even seasonal allergies. That is a histamine response as well, but it can be in response to pathogens as well. And then it expands blood vessels, and this is what can cause the flushing, swelling, and that's basically so that your immune system can get to that area faster if it was some sort of pathogen or an allergen. Histamine works through a few different receptors. So we've got H1, and this is the most common, the one that people experience the most. This is going to be itching, swelling, anxiety, insomnia. So this is what most people feel when they have a histamine reaction. H2 is going to control the stomach acid, and H3 and 4 are going to be involved in the nervous system and the immune regulation. So you can have any of these affected. So histamine is way beyond, or high histamines is way beyond just the allergy symptoms. Itchy eyes, redness, sneezing, hives. It can really affect your mood, your sleep, your digestion. And so sometimes the symptoms aren't so obvious. They can be a little bit, more, I want to say, kind of B or C level symptoms that people don't associate. So some of the common symptoms that people associate with high histamines are, of course, the ones we just talked about. Hives, redness, itching, skin issues. You might notice this is right after eating. This could be after drinking wine. Wine is very high in histamine, so you might notice the redness or the itching after that. It can be just flushing on the face or in the chest. It can be runny nose or postnasal drip, headaches or migraines. It can be heart palpitations, especially if you're noticing it after meals or at night. It can be digestive issues, bloating, reflux, nausea, anxiety, or a sudden kind of wired feeling. A lot of people feel this at night, very wired. Even though they're tired, they feel very wired, very amped up. Their mind won't calm down. And then insomnia. This could be mind racing or just inability to go to sleep. Kind of goes back to that wired feeling. But some less obvious signs of high histamines, or more so stealth symptoms that you can associate, are going to be things like brain fog or memory issues, dizziness or lightheadedness, especially if you're standing up, and this can be associated with POTS. Then we've got one that I think I see all the time, is really high PMS symptoms. And this can be anxiety, depression, mood swings. It seems like right around their period, mood goes out the window, anxiety creeps up. And this can be because histamine stimulates estrogen, which can worsen PMS symptoms, because right before your period, your estrogen is naturally going up. So now you've got estrogen, you've got histamine, which can amplify everything. It can be frequent urination, tingling or numbness. It can be shortness of breath. It can be cold hands and feet, fatigue. It can be that tired and wired feeling, food sensitivities, and then that chronic hangover feeling, just kind of feeling like, oh, even though you haven't drank alcohol. So what does histamine naturally do? Because it's a naturally occurring chemical in the body, it's got to have jobs, right? We have to have a purpose for it. So histamine is meant to rise and fall. We are not supposed to have really high levels of histamine and stay there. We're supposed to have this ebb and flow, and your body should be able to release it when it's needed, and then when it's done with it, break it down, and that should give you this nice ebb and flow. And the breakdown of histamine comes from two places. We've got the DAO or DAO enzyme, and this is going to break down histamine in the gut and in the bloodstream. And then we have the HNMT, and this is going to work at breaking down histamine in the brain and the liver. So when everything is working optimally, what you should have is the body releases histamine. These two enzymes are able to break it down, and then you get down to normal levels, and then it will come back up again. The problem is when you're either making way too much histamine or these enzymes aren't able to clear it or break it down, you stay with a really high level of histamine. And that extended level of high histamines is where the symptoms start to creep up. And that's where people start having issues. Again, it can start with just kind of the very obvious redness, itching, but then it can start getting into anxiety. It can start getting into not sleeping. It can start getting into all of these other symptoms. So why would we have histamine issues in the first place? Generally, the most common that we see is overproduction of histamine. So when you're exposed, and this is in our world, when you're exposed to mold or parasites or Lyme or chronic infections, what happens is the immune system is on high alert. The immune system knows there's a problem, and especially in some of these stealther guys, the immune system knows there's a really big problem. But what happens is these mast cells get overactivated, and mast cells are what release histamine. These mast cells get overactivated by this constant immune stress. And so what that means is it just keeps dumping histamines and dumping histamines and dumping histamines. So when we look at something like molds, it can directly, acts, these mycotoxins act as immunosuppressants, and the mold itself is a threat to the immune system, especially in the mucous membranes in the gut. What that can also do is it can downregulate the DAO enzyme or the DAO enzyme. And so what that happens is now you've got a ton of histamine being released, but you're not able to actually break it down. So your histamine levels just keep building and building and building. And we see this in two ways. Sometimes people start this way, right? They know they're very histamine sensitive. Even before detox, mold exposure drove this. They lived in a house with mold, and histamine symptoms started there. That's a common occurrence. But then we have another set of people that have no idea. They might not even really have symptoms, and they start going through and detoxing mold, and all of a sudden, as they're releasing these mycotoxins into the system, that's what stresses and causes the histamine flare up and the enzyme not breaking down as well. Something else is parasites, and parasites are, of course, irritating to the gut lining, but they can actually produce histamine themselves as a byproduct. So not only do you have, the immune system activated, producing histamine, you can have the parasites themselves releasing histamine, and then we have these little immune soldiers called eosinophils, and eosinophils are the immune activation that get sent to go take down parasites and kill parasites. And when we have a flare up of eosinophils, they're going to trigger mast cells to then trigger more histamines. So you can have any of these infections can keep triggering histamine reactions. Again, very similar to mold. Some people it's right away. Other people it's a little bit more prolonged as they start killing and as they start detoxing. So then what affects pore clearance? So pore clearance, your body doesn't just go, you know what? I think today we're not going to clear histamines, right? Your body's always working for you. It's just sometimes there's some things that alter the biomechanics of how our body works. So if your gut is inflamed, it's not going to produce adequate amounts of the DAO enzyme. So if you're not producing plenty of that, then you don't have enough to break down histamine levels. So you'll just get this slow creep up over time. Then we also have the liver. So if the liver is overburdened from toxins, poor diet, not having the right nutrients, stress, whatever's taxing the liver, you're not going to have enough of that HNMT to keep up as well. So for many people, they get hit by so many ways, right? A poor diet causes gut inflammation, or stress, or toxins causes gut inflammation. Their liver is also taxed. So both of these enzymes can end up not working as optimally, and we can have these histamine levels building up. Then we've got certain nutrients that are essential for the breakdown of histamine. So we need vitamin C, we need the Bs. They're essential for histamine breakdown as well as liver detoxification and health. Then we need copper and magnesium. If we don't have enough of these, we can't adequately break down our histamine levels. So a study in 2007 by Mainz and Novak, they really looked at histamines, and they were looking at, is it a food problem? Is it a other problem, right? And they found that it's not generally a food problem. And this is something that we're going to get into in the myths in a second, but people often say, oh, just stop eating high histamine foods, things like avocado, bone broth, leftovers, that kind of thing, and it will fix your problems. Yes, the foods that have high histamines are gasoline to the fire, but the study found that it's not a food issue. They found that it's impaired breakdown generally in the gut. That was where the most common breakdown issues stemmed from. So let's look at some common histamine myths. These are things that I see all the time and we hear all the time. So the first one is histamine intolerance is just a food allergy. So histamine intolerance and food allergies are very, very different. A food allergy is an IgE-mediated immune response, right? The immune system has a response to a very specific food. Shellfish, peanuts, gluten, very specific food causes an immune activation. Histamine intolerance is, imagine you've got a bucket, and the bucket is your histamine capacity, and if you're able to break it down, fine, then your bucket never fills up. But if you have issues with breakdown, you have mold or infections or whatever is causing this histamine release, the breakdown's not great when you eat foods that are high in histamine. So this would be things like leftovers, a lot of deli meats, avocado, bone broth, anything really that's that slow cook can be very high in histamines. When you eat these, the bucket is mainly full from just the buildup of histamine in your system and not able to break it down. When you eat these foods, it might cause the histamine bucket to overflow. So it's really looking at the foods as they're gasoline to a fire that is already lit from making too much histamine, not able to break it down, not necessarily the food itself. The second myth is that you're going to have to stay low histamine forever, and that is never the goal. The goal is figuring out, why do you have histamine issues in the first place? Is it that your liver needs to be supported? Is it that we need to go in and work on the gut, cleaning out bacterial overgrowth, parasites, mold? Is it that we need to, really support the enzyme breakdown of histamines? So once you've addressed those things, then the body should be able to handle histamines no problem. It's when you have all of these issues in the first place, right? You might have mold and some parasites, some leaky gut, some liver stress. That's when going on a low histamine diet is helpful, because then it's just lowering that extra little bit of histamine that you may be getting from your diet, but again, not meant to be a long-term solution. The next myth is that antihistamines fix the problem, so just take those. And again, they do help, right? If you can get the histamines to come down a little bit, they can help. So there's, of course, the over-the-counter things like Benadryl, but then there are supplements and herbs, quercetin, stinging nettle, vitamin C that work very well as antihistamines to help. But again, it's a band-aid. It's not figuring out why the histamine's high in the first place. So if you can go in and use those while you're working on uncovering and working through the problems, it'll help you move through faster, but again, not meant to be a long-term solution. And then the last myth is my favorite of all the myths, and that is that if you have a histamine problem, you need to avoid B vitamins. And this is probably the biggest myth because B vitamins are so essential for your liver. Your liver needs B vitamins to do all of its processes, right? Detoxification requires B vitamins. You also need B vitamins for those enzymes to break down histamine. The caveat is then where people think that they're having an issue is if your liver is super backed up, right? You don't have adequate amount of B vitamins. When you add these Bs in, it can cause the liver to start doing its jobs. And by doing that, you might have an initial little histamine flare, right? If your liver hasn't been working great, you've got histamine, you've got toxins, and all of a sudden you give it all this fuel to do its jobs, what can happen is you might notice a temporary little flare-up of whether it's histamine symptoms or detox symptoms. However, that is essential to get through it and give the liver what it needs to do its job. So slow and steady wins this race. Don't go take a bunch of B vitamins and, you have to go slow and steady, and that will prevent those big flare-ups and allow you to get on vitamins that are going to support liver health, detoxification, all of that. So looking at the B vitamins, the essential guys are B6, and this is essential for the DAO enzyme, methylfolate and methylcobalamin. This is B9 and B12. They're going to support methylation, which is going to help clear histamines, help support the liver pathways. Then we've got B2 riboflavin, and this is going to help with the methylation as well. And then niacin, and this is going to help kind of clean up the methyl groups if you're over-methylating, which is a very small subset of people. Most people are not over-methylators, they're under-methylators. But again, it's all about dosage. Don't go take a big amount of B vitamins. It's slow and steady. And if you're someone that's very sensitive to histamine, having histamine reactions, you need to go at a very slow amount, very slow rate with a very small amount of supplements to not have big flare-ups along the way. So how do you go about really supporting your histamine balance, supporting the root causes why they're there? So the first is you have to lower your histamine load. And this again is a band-aid. It's not a forever thing, but it's just to keep it from that little excess amount of histamine. And so you're going to want to go on a temporary low histamine diet. And this can really help reduce symptoms quickly, especially certain people have certain foods that tend to just push them over. But some of the most common foods that you'll want to reduce are going to be aged meats, leftovers, fermented foods, alcohol, spinach, avocados, bananas, tomatoes, eggplants, and canned tuna. So pulling those out of your diet, and I think a high histamine diet can be one of the hardest. You can't really have anything that's older than 24 hours. So the longer something sits, the more histamine builds up. So you're really cooking every meal fresh, pulling out some of my favorite foods, right? Bone broth, avocados, some of my favorite things, fermented foods. But it is something that you can temporarily lower to help push you forward. The second thing you'll want to do is support the DAO enzyme activity. And so there's several ways you can do this. You can just take DAO supplements that give you the enzyme to help break down those histamines. Seeking Health has a great one. Then there's some vitamins that you can take to give these enzymes everything they need to do their jobs. So vitamin C, B6, copper and magnesium, and then really going in and restoring the gut. So some gut health supplements. But the thing to note is copper does need to be looked at, making sure that you have adequate amounts and not too much, especially in comparison to your zinc levels before you start supplementing it. The next thing we need to do is stabilize these mast cells. Our mast cells are what are releasing all of these histamine levels, right? All these histamines into our system. So if your immune system is on high alert, you're just going to keep dumping histamine until those mast cells calm down. So some natural mast cell stabilizers, of course, are quercetin, stinging nettle, vitamin C, chamomile, holy basil, and skullcap. All of these guys have been shown to really help calm down the mast cells. And then a few other things that are not so obvious that can help is reducing EMF exposure. EMF exposure, especially near beds, can activate mast cells. So this would be sleeping with your cell phone nearby, having Wi-Fi on at night. So you really want to turn off your Wi-Fi, make sure your phone is far away from you when you sleep. Another thing that's helpful is getting sunlight first thing in the morning. Getting out and getting sunlight for 10-15 minutes is very helpful in regulating your circadian rhythm, which can help regulate histamine response. And then nervous system regulation. So helping the nervous system stay calm. When our nervous system is hypervigilant on something, we can also have these histamine reactions. So this could be things like vagus nerve work, breath work, meditation, whatever you like for calming the nervous system, but it is a key part of the histamine reactions in mast cell. Then the missing piece, I think that most people forget, is really figuring out the root cause, right? So first is supporting the liver and its drainage. So the liver is really going to be breaking down a lot of histamine levels. It's using the HMNT enzyme. So if the liver is sluggish, and what would cause a sluggish liver? High toxic load, poor methylation, not having enough vitamins and minerals, poor diet, high stress, all of these things can really affect the liver. Then on top of that, we've got mold, parasites, bacterial imbalances, all these other root causes. So really going in, your liver has to be in optimal shape. So you want to focus on your drainage pathways. So again, having good liver support vitamins. You can do water with lemon first thing in the morning, castor oil packs, dry brushing, rebounding, standing on a little trampoline and bouncing really stimulates lymphatic movement. Going to the bathroom every day seems very simple, very basic, but that is a huge drainage piece. If you are not going to the bathroom every single day, then that is something that needs to be looked at, and you really need to focus on, having adequate bowel movements throughout the day. Some herbs that are very helpful for the liver are things like milk thistle, dandelion, beets, carrots, celery juice. I will warn that celery juice is very high in oxalates, so that can be a trigger for someone with mold. Phosphatidylcholine, glycine, and NAC. All of these guys are very supportive for the liver. But again, I generally recommend working with someone if you are having histamine issues because it's so complex. Work with someone that really understands it and they can help make sure that you're on adequate amount of liver support. Also, while uncovering why your liver is stressed in the first place, figuring out exactly what your root causes are. And the last piece is detox protocols, right? You have to figure out why you're having this excessive amount of histamine or poor breakdown in the first place. So testing, right? Is it mold, parasites, bacteria, environmental toxins, Lyme? What is it exactly that is causing this immune activation? Once you figure that out, knowing that you have a prone to high histamines, then you have to go slow. If you take a normal protocol, you need to go at a very, very, small amount. So if a normal protocol is starting at 1 capsule twice a day, you might be doing a half of a capsule every other day or every third day. And again, you really want to work with someone that knows how to guide you through this because it has to be a slow and steady approach. Because if you go too fast, you start pulling too much mold or killing too many parasites, a lot of times we see these horrible, horrible histamine reactions, and that can really slow you down along the way. So once you figured it out, just slow and steady wins the race. And once your body gets used to it and starts clearing histamines, then you can go on a normal pace protocol. But initially, it is a slow and steady approach to really make sure that you don't overload your system and cause it to flare up. And then we have to take a little break and slow down. So slow and steady wins this race every time. So, histamine issues are very, very common. And there's so many people that, I think have good intention that will, just say, oh, just cut out the foods or, oh, just take a Dow enzyme. But again, you want to figure out why. Why is this happening? Is it your liver? Is it your gut? And going deeper, is it parasites, Lyme, mold, bacteria? What is causing it? So if you can identify that, that really gives you the roadmap for healing. Yes, you need to lower histamine foods. Yes, you need to work on liver. But then okay, I need to get these mycotoxins out of my system, or I need to work on these parasites. And then it gives you a really clear path. You're just going to go a little slower. But remember, this is something that is very common, and it doesn't mean that you can't detox. It just means it's going to be a little bit slower, but healing is possible. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next week.